I'm Michaela from Team Retro, where we like retro games, we like roguelikes, and we like the devices that bring them to us. Now, for a couple weeks on the channel, I've been playing around with running Android 10 on a modded Nintendo Switch, and I did put out a video on how to get Android 10 working on a Switch, provided it is one of the models capable of running custom firmware. And I also did a video on the feasibility of using a modded Nintendo Switch running Android 10 as a Stadia, remote play, and cloud gaming device. And I just want to say thank you to those who commented and watched and liked those videos. It really does mean a lot that the content I'm starting to provide on this channel is actually helpful to some people and others are enjoying watching. So today we're going to wrap things up with the series on using the Nintendo Switch as an Android 10 device. And today we're going to look at the feasibility of this device as a retro gaming machine and also as a roguelike gaming machine. So we're going to cover what we usually cover on this channel. Can it play retro games? Can it play roguelikes? And then we're going to do Commendations and Condemnations and just kind of wrap up overall if running Android 10 on a Nintendo Switch is worth it. We've got a lot to cover, so let's dive in and let's get started. So for the majority of my emulation test, I use the Android version of RetroArch. Here we are playing Super Mario Bros. 3 on the NES. And RetroArch can basically handle most older system emulation. So as you could see, NES here is running just fine. And it looks sharp and crisp on the Nintendo Switch's screen. It probably looks just as good as if you were to run the NES online, except you are going to have a much bigger library of games from what Nintendo is actually giving us right now. And you could see it's running smooth. There's no latency issues. I am able to use the Joy-Cons no problem, and we're doing very well. Here is Kirby's Dream Land 2 for the Game Boy. And I used this for my second emulation test because I wanted to show how using the MGBA emulator, you can actually get Super Game Boy enhancements right in the emulator. And this is something that not even Nintendo is doing. And Kirby's Dream Land 2 was one of my favorite games to play when I was younger, and I loved playing this on the Super Game Boy because of the color optimizations. It just looks beautiful. And here on a Nintendo Switch running Android 10 using RetroArch, it runs just fine, and you get these beautiful color palettes. You could do the same thing with Pokemon Red and Blue because those also had Super Game Boy enhancements, and you could actually play those games in full color, and it's really nice. Here's Super Mario RPG on Super Nintendo, and I just wanted to showcase this game because we have a full 60 frames per second, and this is one of those games that doesn't always work because of the chip they used to manufacture this game at the time. It's actually very hard to emulate, and in a lot of devices that I have, this opening sequence just stutters all the time. And when you actually get into the gameplay, you can see it's very smooth as well. So this is a great device to play Super Mario RPG on. And just to show that Super Mario RPG isn't just a fluke, here is Star Fox, a Super FX game, and we are also running at full speed with the same core. Now, PS1, for some reason, we started to run into a little bit of trouble. This is the PCSX Rearmed core. And normally this core runs very well, but here we are playing Tekken 3, and we started to get some frame rate drops. Now, to be fair, this is one of the harder games to emulate, so other games may perform better than this, but I wanted to provide a worst case scenario. And in this case, PlayStation 1 emulation using RetroArch might not be the way to go. Now, I didn't test any standalone emulators, but if there are any, they may perform better. Moving on to standalone emulators, here is New Super Mario Bros. On Nintendo DS, utilizing the Drastic emulator. No problems here, I'm using this with default settings, but you can play around with this, you can move the screen, you can overlay the bottom screen on top of the top screen, which for smaller screens like the Retroid Pocket 2, I love doing. But when I went to change the screens for this, it just didn't look right, and it looked really stretched. So I decided to keep it at the default side by side, and with the screen size, it's actually not an issue. Here is Sonic Adventure 2 running on the Redream emulator, and any device that can run Redream usually will run Dreamcast pretty flawlessly, and this game will run great, and any other Dreamcast games that you have should run fine. I don't have a frames per second counter on this footage, but everything looks smooth and sounds smooth, so I'm just going to let it play for a second. And finally, for retro gaming, we have God of War Chains of Olympus running on the PPSSPP emulator. And we're running at a frame skip of 1, and we're running at 1x resolution, and we're still getting frame rate drops. It's playable, but it is not ideal. But Chains of Olympus is one of the harder PSP games to emulate. If you were to play something like Patapon or Mega Man Powered Up, you'll probably get better performance than you will out of this game, but just like before, I wanted to show you a worst case scenario, just to show you that not every game will run flawlessly here. However, as far as Chains of Olympus goes, the Nintendo Switch runs this game better than most. So I think we can conclude that Nintendo Switch running Android 10 can absolutely play retro games. However, PlayStation and PlayStation Portable are going to have mixed performance. So moving on to roguelikes, here we are with the Android version of Dead Cells. And it runs about as you would expect. It does play, it does look fine. However, my recommendation of a Nintendo Switch running Android 10 as a roguelike device is kind of skewed by the fact that you can get all of the best roguelikes on Nintendo Switch anyway. And if you look at the comparison of the two versions here, it looks like the actual Nintendo Switch version actually has more content, and it looks like it's actually the better version of the game to play. Visually, these look fine, but if I had to choose between the Android version or the Switch version of Dead Cells, I'm going to play the Switch version hands down. Now let's just do a quick screen comparison of the Android version versus the Switch version. Here's the Android version up close. And here's the Switch version, and they both seem to be outputting at 720p in handheld mode, and they both look about the same. The only reason I could viably see to choose the Android version over the Switch version is if you don't want to spend the money on the Switch version of the game. But if you have a modified Switch, chances are you will have other methods of getting the Switch version of Dead Cells anyway, so I would just recommend that you do that. Now here you could see I just typed roguelike into the Google Play Store, and I did get a large selection of Android roguelikes, including Slay the Spire, which is about $10. And then there's some other ones here, like the Gauntlet, which is a turn-based roguelike that looks like it could be interesting, and it is free to play. And you could scroll down, you could see there's another one here, Caves, which looks like it's free to play, but also has some in-app purchases. So there are some options here if you really want to play roguelikes on Android. Here's another one, Order of Fate, and this is a dungeon RPG. So these might be worth giving a shot. They might be okay, they might not be. But all of the best roguelikes are going to be on Switch anyway, so unless you really want to try some of these Android games, I would suggest you stay on the Switch OS for roguelikes. So to answer the question, yes, you can play roguelikes this way. I just don't recommend it. So let's do Commendations and Condemnations. Starting with the Commendations, the Nintendo Switch running Android 10 is surprisingly good as a retro device. You get Redream, you get RetroArch, which can handle most older systems, and it performed very well for playing retro games. However, where this device really shined, and I know we didn't show it in this video, but it is fantastic as a cloud gaming device. It ran Stadia, PlayStation Remote Play very well. The Switch screen is beautiful, it always has been, and it's very conducive to retro gaming. And Android has always been a flexible operating system, so you can pretty much customize this to your liking. Moving on to Condemnations, I was a little disappointed by the performance issues I ran into with PlayStation and PlayStation Portable. PlayStation Portable is a little harder to emulate, but I guess I expected better out of PlayStation performance, but that could be a me problem, and that could be fixed by using a standalone emulator. This method is not the best way to play roguelikes. If you're going to play roguelikes on a Nintendo Switch, you might as well just get the game on Nintendo Switch. And my final condemnation is the lack of availability to use your Switch in this way. Nintendo patched the Tegra chip years ago, and the amount of Switches that can actually be modified like this are getting fewer and fewer by the day, so this might not be something that you can even do. That'll do it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed watching my series on using Android 10 on a modified Nintendo Switch. And if this video was helpful to you in any way, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate everybody who supported the channel so far. Until the next time, bye for now, and don't stop believing.